Hi everyone, I'm Emily Felix and I will be the moderator for today's debate.
Hi, I'm Becca, and I will be playing the role of a mother who is in favor of personal liberties. Although she's not opposed to some habilitation, she does think that a child's ability to choose for themselves is most important.
And my name is Kelsey McCarthy. I will be playing the role of a mother who advocates for full habilitation regardless of the child's level of comfort with that habilitation.
So today we'll be debating the right to personal liberties versus the need for habilitation. America has a rich history of fighting for individual rights, from the right for women to vote, the right to marry who you choose, and the right to religious freedom, to name a few. People have lost their lives protesting and marching for their own and others' civil liberties. People immigrate to America to have access to liberties that most of us take for granted. For individuals with disabilities, they may not feel that they have the same basic rights that all Americans are born with. As we navigate our way through attaining our master's degree so we can become behavior analysts, we need to realize that the choices we make for our clients may promote habilitation, but these choices may infringe upon their right to choose and their personal liberties. Habilitation involves helping individuals acquire the skills needed to live an independent life. An independent life for one individual may mean that they pick out what they'll eat for the day, while for another, this may mean acquiring the skills to gain employment and even live in their own apartment. Legislation has been passed that guarantees an individual's right to habilitation. In 1975, a court case, Wyatt versus Stickney, resulted in the court mandated minimum standards that included a humane and physical environment, individualized habilitation plans, and qualified staff to implement interventions. Some of the state and federal legislation that secure the right to habilitation are the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act of 1979, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975. One of the drawbacks of this legislation is that it imposes restrictions and rules on the programs that provide habilitation to individuals with disabilities. If the programs do not comply with the federal guidelines, they may lose federal funding, and the pressure placed upon the programs to meet the requirements set by the federal government may infringe upon an individual's personal liberties. In the court case Dow versus Bolton, Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas discussed the importance of an individual's right to be let alone, including the privilege of an individual to plan his own affairs, to what they think is best, or do or go where they please, to be free of bodily restraint or compulsion, freedom to walk, stroll, or loaf. While we may take for granted the right to call out of work or play hooky from school, many times an individual with developmental disabilities does not have this right. Their daily schedule is dictated to them from when they will wake up to what they'll wear and what they will eat, as well as any leisure activities they may partake in during the day. While researching this topic, we decided to use Brigham's definition of choice, which is the opportunity to make an uncoerced selection from two or more alternative events, consequences, or responses. By uncoerced, we mean that there are no programmed, implicit, or explicit consequences for selecting one alternative over the other, except for the characteristics of the alternatives themselves. Some issues that are faced when trying to achieve habilitation are individuals have little input in the interventions that are used for their habilitation, and professionals may not care about the client's preferences. Individuals are taught how to make choices, and not many opportunities to make choices are given to the individual. Research has shown that when given two scenarios where choice is not available and when an individual can choose between two options, that individual will often choose the scenario where choice is available to them, even if they're picking from activities that are not preferred and they find aversive. Individuals are more likely to participate in activities where choice is available to them. Choice even improves the performance of tasks for individuals. Individuals on the spectrum engaged in problem behavior less frequently when choice was involved. We will be discussing ethical principles of concern and ethical codes that play a role in regards to the right to habilitation versus the right to personal liberties, conforming to society, the pros and cons of choice making, personal liberties, and habilitation. So I'm going to pose the first question to Kelsey. What evidence is there that habilitation will help an individual to succeed in life?
In terms of habilitation, there is so much evidence based off of individual research, group research, that There's the Lovas research that shows those children were able to be indistinguishable from their peers. And in terms of conformity, there's a great deal of evidence indicating that striving for conformity, which may be a negative term to some, but in my opinion, from my child's standpoint, I would prefer for him to fit in with his peers who are typically developing, as research indicates that normal social interactions lead to meeting more contingencies for reinforcement, which is why, which is something that we all advocate for, is positive reinforcement as frequently as possible. And many individuals with ASD do not have an even playing field with neurotypicals due to their social shortcomings. And working on these different skills through ABA services, speech services, will allow them to meet those contingencies that I was discussing.
Now, for the part of personal liberties, you mentioned the Lovas study, which was done several years ago, and I have been unable to find anything that shows that in adulthood that actually helped them live a better life. So there's a lack of evidence that these services continue to be maintained in adulthood. The diagnosis rate of autism has risen in the last few decades. And this is mostly among children who are being diagnosed. And many of these children have yet to make it into adulthood. So there's really a very limited amount of evidence that supports that these services will benefit these people in the long run. Few studies have been done on adults, and the National Standards Project, the earliest study was done in 1987, which was not that long ago, especially in this field. And while behavior intervention is identified as an established treatment through the National Standards Project that will continue to work into adulthood, the evidence for this is sparse. They only had 17 studies to back up this finding. When you compare that to childhood and the 453 studies that are done in the same category for those under 22, then you can look at people who have autism and who have been successful, such as Temple Grandin. She has ASD, she has a doctorate, and she did not receive the type of habilitation in the extent that so many people say that she needs. Yes, she was made to follow rules. Yes, she was given some services, but not at the sacrifice of her own choices. So I think it's important to keep in mind that there are those who are successful without intense habilitation and who are still free to make their choices.
Great points, ladies. Question 2, I'm going to pose to Becca. Do you think that the habilitative process is forcing individuals to conform to the norms of society? And if it is, are there costs or benefits to conforming to the social norms of society has set in place for its members?
Thank you for that question, Emily. It was mentioned that the Lovas study makes a child indistinguishable from their peers. Now, this to me is a very subjective, objective concept. Like, everyone is unique, everyone is different. So what peers are they becoming indistinguishable from? Because if you look at any peer group, you see a range of individuals, from those who are great at sports to those who are great at books. So what peer group are we trying to make them conform to? Are we trying to make them conform to the quote-unquote populars, or is the brains the peer group that we want them to conform to? What becomes acceptable and what becomes unacceptable for them to do? Because if you look at a peer group, you will see a wide range of these behaviors that these kids exhibit, done with quote-unquote neurotypical peers, and they're not made to stop these behaviors. When we start talking about conformity, we start talking about things that other kids will do, but that might actually cause a problem for a child with autism, things such as haircuts. Most children with ASD do not enjoy haircuts, and yet if they're a boy, they are forced to go and get a haircut because society says that they have to have short hair. And so their parents conform to that norm, and it's uncomfortable for them. Or simple things like waiting in line for Santa. These are really tough situations that other kids with autism can do, but they're uncomfortable, and yet we force these children with these disabilities into these situations all the time, when we start forcing them to conform to society, we don't know what they're losing from their individuality. Their special interests might develop into meaningful careers. Again, I will use Temple Grandin as an example here. She had a fascination with cattle, and she has made an amazing career out of doing that. And that's not something that her parents probably would have chosen for her, or that they would have wanted her to conform to and to join, but she has done an absolutely phenomenal job in her career field. When we start to do this, we stifle their creativity, and we focus too much on them acting like their peers that we lose a part of them. Each of us have our own things that are different about us, but you wouldn't expect somebody to come into your home and tell you that you have to stop twirling your hair, or that you have to stop tapping your pencil or clicking your pencil, or that you have to stop making certain hand gestures. But this is exactly what we're doing to these kids. We can use their differences, we can use their self-stimulatory behaviors to transform into meaningful, amazing careers, or just jobs, things that will get them in the public and things that people will appreciate. Recently, there's the story of the dancing barista, and he is amazing, and I'll share a video with you. It's a child with autism, well, an adolescent with autism, who has, as they put it, a movement disorder, and has a lot of self-stimulatory behaviors, but they've transformed that into something that makes him unique in his career field. So here's a video that I would like to share with you guys of that one. Maybe, if it will turn up. Let's try this again. Of course, it worked every other time.
Damn. Yeah. Yeah.
I would like the chance to respond to that. So while I do absolutely admire Temple Grandin, and she's someone that, I hope, when I think of my son, I do hope that he will aspire to the same, educational advancements and everything that she's made. I also can't help but wonder, if she had received the same services that are available today, which unfortunately were not available when she was a child, where she would be. I mean, she's already, like you've discussed, Becca, she's miraculous, but I mean, maybe she would be even more comfortable in social situations had she had the behavioral therapy that our children can go through today. And in terms of behavioral excesses or things like the dancing, through behavioral services, you can go ahead and put behaviors such as stereotypical movement, stereotypical speech, or different self-stimulatory behaviors on stimulus control, to where they understand that they're not supposed to do those in public. And as much as that video is great, I can't help but wonder, if some people might tease him if they go into that Starbucks, which breaks my heart. If I were to think of my child being teased for the way that they move or doing something atypical, it's just, I can't handle that. And I would much rather him learn not to do those things in public than to be made fun of, as about 98% of children on the spectrum get severely bullied in school situations and social situations, which is why I advocate more for them to conform, like you said, so that they are not exposed to the aversive bullying and they're able to meet more contingencies for reinforcement. Also, self-stimulatory behavior on the dark side of it can be injurious. You know, children will poke their eyes, children will scratch themselves, and without the services that they need, they would choose to do those things, which is very scary.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, I'm going to pose to Becca first, and then Kelsey, you can reply. Should individuals with disabilities be able to make their own choices in regards to their treatment and personal life, and is there research that has shown that choice making is beneficial to an individual?
Thank you for that question, Emily. Making choices is one of our most basic rights. Discuss free will and how all of us have a right to choose. We can choose to call in sick to work, as you mentioned in your introduction. We can choose to procrastinate on an assignment. We can choose to delay cleaning the kitchen till later that day. These are all choices we have. However, oftentimes when children have services, and my own son included, they will want to map out his entire day, and he doesn't have a choice. They will want him to do this right now, whereas he would maybe rather prefer to do that later on. So legislation guarantees his right to choose and his right to make these choices for himself, but often they're not accepted by other individuals. So if my son says, I'm done, I don't want any more services today, does he have the right to choose that, or should we force habilitation on him? Because habilitation is also one of the things that legislation controls, is that he has the right to habilitation as well. But studies have shown that when you provide choices for children, that it will actually lower their problem behaviors. If they're given the option to choose between this activity or this activity, it will lower their problem behaviors, even if that means that they're choosing an activity that they don't necessarily prefer. So, for example, let's say my son really does not like to vacuum the floor, but if he one day needs to vacuum his own apartment, it's a skill he has to have. So if he is given the choice between vacuuming the floor or playing a game, knowing that he will have to do both of those, but he gets to choose which one he does first, he may choose playing the game first so that he gets the fun item out of the way, and then he'll go on to vacuuming the floor, and he'll probably be more willing to do it than if he wasn't given the choice and just told to vacuum the floor. Or he may go the other way, and he may choose that he wants to get the vacuuming of the floor all done and out of the way before he goes on to play the game so that he can enjoy the game. But it will decrease the problem behaviors. It also increases their dependence, because if they're given the choice of what to choose, and they may not always make the right choices, but let's be real here, not anybody in this world always makes the right choices. We all make mistakes, and we learn from them. So if they do make a mistake, we help them work through it, and we help them understand where they can make a better choice next time, and that will only increase their independence in the future.
So in order to respond to that, I just wanted to bring up the fact that as much as I like the idea of providing various choices and providing more choices for children, it's just the reality that children of every developmental level are not always provided choices. You know, within a school setting, I don't know that teachers necessarily will always give the choice of, do you want to do your math or your English first? That sounds nice in theory, but I just don't think that most classrooms are run that way. And I think that in a lot of ways, children need to learn to follow instructions and have basic compliance. And back to the whole choice-making thing, unfortunately, a lot of research indicates that some individuals who have disabilities have no leisure skills. They have no functional skills. They might not communicate. And if you leave them to their own devices, they might continue in that trajectory. as well as, like I brought up self-injurious behavior earlier, many individuals choose to hurt themselves. They may choose to, in their free time, just nap. They may injure themselves. They may engage in self-stimulatory behaviors, which, you know, even although some may not hurt them, they're not helping them. They're not enriching their environment. They're not improving any of their functional skills or communication. They're not engaging with another individual, and this is a social deficit. Many individuals may make choices that leave them helpless in some ways. You know, I know you mentioned your son and his vacuuming skills, and that's something that's aversive for him. Some individuals may refuse to learn how to make a meal for themselves. They may refuse to learn how to use the toilet properly. And those are things that, if they don't accomplish those goals through behavioral services, even if it's not their choice to do it, they're going to be left in a position that's not as advantageous for them. And as a mother, I just don't know why you wouldn't want to push for the most advantageous situation for your child. In addition, you know, many children on the spectrum, or many adults on the spectrum, have really serious issues with, you know, different sensory processing. They have impaired emotional regulation, and they have various, like I said, social deficits, and those cannot be remedied without intensive behavioral services. And that includes contriving situations that may make them upset and they may choose to get out of on their own free will, but if you push them through it, they will be better for it. And I know one of the things you brought up earlier, Becca, was a haircut. And I agree. I've seen different children who have struggled with this, but at the same point, I brought up the bullying point, and I would just be concerned for a child who wasn't able to get their haircut and didn't fit in with their peers. And I saw something recently that really warmed my heart. It was a barber who was willing to get on the floor with a child. He went at the child's pace, which, you know, kind of goes back to choice making. The child chose a different mode of a haircut, but with that kind of therapeutic approach, they were able to cut the little boy's hair, and he looked great after.
Great points, ladies. So, question 4, Kelsey, I'm going to let you answer first, and then Becca, you can respond to her. Legislation has been passed that ensures an individual's right to habilitation as well as their rights to personal liberties. Could these regulations infringe upon a person's rights, or could these regulations create an ethical issue when caring for persons with disabilities?
That is a great question. In terms of legislation, I know Becca's already mentioned, you know, that we all have our personal liberties, we all have the right to choose. But one of the things that I referenced was the behavior analyst compliance codes, and various codes such as 1.01, the reliance on scientific knowledge, 2.02, responsibility to clients, and 2.09, treatment and intervention efficacy, really support my notion that when you can intervene, you absolutely should. So, you know, this is an empirically validated treatment method. We are responsible to help them, especially as a mother. I would always want to do as much as I possibly could to help my child. And, you know, we're doing interventions that work. We do interventions that day by day we're taking data that shows that this is working.
In response to that, Kelsey, I would like to point out that, you know, everyone is allowed to have preferences, and we may view the child as different, and we may view them as needing services, but things have come a long way since very, very beginning, when it was thought that autism was caused by a mother's inability to love her child, a refrigerator mother. She was just too cold to her child, and that's why he acted the way he did. This is the beginnings of autism. This is where we started out, and it wasn't that long ago. So you see how other movements have changed, and you see how gay rights have advanced, because not too long ago, homosexuality was considered a mental disorder, and it no longer is in that category. You see that not too long ago it was not okay for interracial couples to marry, and that's fine now. So as time progresses and as autism is out there and as people become more educated, I don't think you're going to run into the same problems in the future that we currently have with children being bullied, because people will understand better about these situations and they will make advances. And so you can't necessarily say that, oh, they have to be like their peers because that's the only way they're going to be successful in life, because they will advance, and our country and our world as a whole will advance just as we have it on so many other issues. We have won our right to vote as women. We have won our right to go to school. And gays can now get married in all 50 states. And these are things that people wouldn't have thought possible, and people viewed completely different than they do now. So we look back now on these situations and we see how unethically these people were treated and how almost ridiculous it was that we treated these differences on such a huge scale. And I think that as time progresses, it's going to be the same with autism, that we're going to look back the way we have treated these children and the way that we've responded to the way that they act, and find it absolutely ridiculous that these are the things that we thought they had to change to fit what we thought was best for them. Because the truth of the matter is, the best person to decide what is best for somebody is that person themselves. I can have all the hopes and dreams that I want for my child, and I know my parents had hopes and dreams for me. And I don't know that I fulfilled all their hopes and dreams, but they also didn't force me to do what they wanted to do. And I think that if you've worked full habilitation, that's basically what you're doing. You're forcing your child to become that person that you hope that they would be. And no child lives up to every expectation of their parents. So it's up to them to decide for themselves and to decide what they want to do in their life. And if they want to work with cattle, that's fine, because that may not be your choice, but that's their choice. If they want to be an artist, if they want to be a pianist, if they want to be a movie designer, if they want to build Legos for the rest of their life, if they want to design games, it's our job as parents to let them develop into the person that they want to be and to support them in doing so.
You guys have come up with some really great arguments. So the BACB provides an ethical code to guide behavior analysts when providing services for individuals with developmental disabilities. What are the ethical codes that support the need for habilitation and the right to exercise personal liberties?
So I think I kind of jumped ahead a little bit with the last question, so I apologize for that. In addition to those 3 codes that I mentioned, just to review, reliance on scientific knowledge, responsibility to our clients, as well as treatment intervention efficacy, I would also like to bring up some of just the key ethical issues regarding this debate. The first one that I think of is do no harm. Allowing someone to continue struggling with a social deficit or with a lack of independence, a lack of functional skills, is wrong in my opinion. I want to do everything I can to help my child to communicate, help him, be more social, and help him have more adaptive functional skills that he can utilize to gain more reinforcement in his environment. And even if that isn't always his preference, of course he would rather, like Becca, brought up all the special interests. Of course he would rather play his video games or watch TV or engage in jumping or spinning or rocking rather than go through his services. But I will always insist that he does that because I know that's what's good for him. I know another one too. I'm sure, Becca, you'll end up citing this as well. But in terms of respecting autonomy, I feel that the whole goal of these services is to strive for independence. So in terms of that, I feel even though you might be taking a choice away from them in the present day because they're not, choosing to go through these services at their own free will, ultimately you are respecting their autonomy because you're working for them to have that independence so that they can make more significant choices, like have more opportunities to have a job, have the skills to make it through a college education and things like that. And then the last one that I would cite would be the notion of treating others with care and compassion. I don't think there's anything more compassionate than doing everything you can to make sure that your child will have a successful and independent life. And as much as, yes, it may be aversive to have to go through these schedules, to have to go through the drills of a discrete trial-based program, it's for his own good, and I will always push for that.
I do understand your point, and you're right. I am going to bring up treating others with respect and also respecting autonomy. They have a right to their independence. They have a right to be who they want to be. We all have a right to be who we want to be. You have chosen to pursue this career, which is not necessarily the way I would have done it. You are fighting for habilitation, and I absolutely respect your right as a mother to do what you feel is best for your child, and that's what I'm doing too. I'm respecting his individuality in doing this, and I think that's what's best for him, is for him to be able to make his choices. I'll also say that doing no harm, if we're forcing them to do something that goes against their desires and their wishes, I would say that that's doing harm to them as well. None of us should be forced to do something we're not comfortable with. Yet we seem to think that if we view it's for their best interest, that we absolutely can force them to do whatever we want them to do because we know better. We're somehow better than they are. And I don't think we are. I don't think these children are any less than us. They're different. They're absolutely different, but they're not any less. They're still just as important, and they're still people who have their own hopes and their own dreams, even if they can't always tell us what those are. As far as ethical compliance codes that play a part, the first is, as a therapist, you need to understand who your ultimate beneficiary is. While your parents are the clients and while a state organization may be a client, the ultimate client is the person that is receiving the services, and it is your job as a therapist to always, always, always fight for what's best for them and to understand that they have a choice. That is your ultimate goal, is to understand that they are the primary person that you're focused on, not the parent, not the organization. It is that client. With that, you have to involve that client, that primary ultimate beneficiary of your services, in planning, and you also should gain their consent. And oftentimes, because these children don't have the ability to say, yes, this is what I want, or these children don't have the ability to say, no, this isn't what I want, or because these children are underage or they're adults who their parents have custody of them, we don't gain their consent, and we don't check with them and make sure it's okay that we're doing what we're doing, that they're okay with us doing that. It's also their job as a client to approve any behavior change program that we have. And we may view that making eye contact is the most important thing this child can do, that it will benefit them so much in life. But what if that child has absolutely no desire to make eye contact? What if he's learned in his life that when he is forced to make eye contact with other individuals, it makes it harder for him to focus on what the people are saying, makes it hard for him to remember what he's trying to say? Is that still fair to him? And is it okay to apply that behavior change program to force eye contact when he's not comfortable with it? And I don't think it is. I think it's our job to respect their decisions on what they want to be and who they want to become.
Okay, so you guys have given the class a lot to think about and some good arguments, but this brings our debate to an end. Just a little bit of background about us. We all chose this debate topic because it hits close to home for all of us. Becca has a son and Kelsey has a brother who are both on the spectrum, and I have a child with Down syndrome. So these are issues we not only face in our professional lives, but our personal lives as well. And we look forward to the class's comments, thoughts, and questions about this debate. But we are going to leave you with a clip from the Temple Grandin movie, just to give you a little bit more to think about.
I am not familiar with the It would be better if we get her to sit calmly. They're trying to control her. Rolling on the floor,
Well, I think spinning is good. And rolling, too. Self-stimulation does seem to eventually calm the nervous system. It can be a way to compensate for not being held. And being held by another person is scary, but rolling or being held by surfaces produces the calming effect that ordinary children get from a hug. How old's your child? Well, I don't have children. No, I'm autistic. No, sensation of being hugged. And I've developed a machine that I get into and hugs me, and I'm different afterwards. I'm more social. Well, I didn't speak until I was 4. Now I have a BA and a master's, and I'm studying for my doctorate. Most autistic people are very sensitive to sounds and colors. Overstimulation hurts. You know, people talking too much at once, you can cause us to panic. How did you get cured? Well, I'm not cured. I'll always be autistic. My mother refused to believe that I wouldn't speak. And when I learned to speak, she made me go to school. And in school and at home, manners and rules were really important. They were pounded into me. I was lucky. All these things worked for me. Everyone worked hard to make sure that I was engaged. And I knew I was different, but not less. And I had a gift. I could see the world in a new way. I could see details that other people were blind to. My mother pushed me to become self-sufficient. I worked summers in my aunt's ranch, went to boarding school and college. Those things were uncomfortable for me at first, but they helped me to open doors to new worlds.
Excuse me, please, but we want to hear everything.
Thank you, guys. This will conclude our debate.